Thank you for joining us today for this training on pandemic-related disaster assistance for SSI recipients. I'm Sarah Galvin from Justice and Aging and the National Center on Law and Elder Rights. Today, we're excited to welcome presenter Kate Lang from Justice and Aging. I will cover a few logistics now before introducing Kate and the training. This webinar is being recorded. The recording will soon be available on our website at ncler.acl.gov. If you'd like to download the slides for this webinar or the practice tip, you can check the chat box on your screen, and there you will see links to the slides and additional materials. They are also located as PDFs in the handouts box on your screen. You will receive a post-webinar email with the slides, materials, and webinar recording. We do have closed captioning available. Please see the chat box for a link that will allow you to view the captions in a separate window. There will be time for questions. Everyone's on mute, so if you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the questions box during the webinar, and we'll try to address as many as we can. And views expressed in this presentation are not necessarily those of the Administration for Community Living. Any answers to questions are the opinion of our presenter and not the Administration for Community Living. This webinar is produced by the National Center on Law and Elder Rights, or NCLER. NCLER is a national resource center that provides legal training and technical assistance to the Legal Services, Elder Rights, Aging and Disability Network. You can see our past and upcoming trainings on the NCLER website at ncler.acl.gov. And now I will introduce Kate Lang. Kate is a senior staff attorney on Justice and Aging's income team. She's in the Washington, D.C. office and works on Social Security and supplemental security income-related issues. Kate has extensive experience as an advocate for low-income older adults and has worked in the legal services setting in many places, including at the Legal Aid Bureau in Riverdale, Maryland, read for the City Legal Clinic in Washington, D.C., and legal services in Northern California. So thank you so much, Kate, for presenting this information, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. I'm going to start by doing a quick overview of SSI, the Supplemental Security Income Program, just so that we are all on the same page going forward and understand which program we're talking about. And then I'm going to share with you some recent policy guidance from the Social Security Administration, and we'll go over what SSA is considering pandemic-related disaster assistance for SSI purposes and what they are not considering pandemic-related disaster assistance. And then we'll talk a little bit about what this guidance means and what happens now for SSI recipients and applicants. So let's begin with a quick overview of SSI. The Supplemental Security Income Program is a federal benefit program administered by the Social Security Administration. It is a means-tested program, which means there are extensive income and resource eligibility rules and other means testing rules that applicants and recipients need to follow each month in order to be eligible for benefits. It does provide a subsistence level income for those age 65 and older, blind, or individuals with disabilities. So I have here in the box the monthly federal benefit rate, the maximum amount of federal benefits that an SSI recipient can receive in this year, 2021. So that's $794 for an individual or $1,191 per month for an eligible couple. So there are many complicated rules for the SSI program, and you can learn more about them. There is a NCLER webinar earlier this year on SSI basics that can be very helpful if you need to learn more about SSI or get a refresher. And then I just wanted to review the differences between the two main kinds of benefits that the Social Security Administration pays out. Today we're talking about SSI, the Supplemental Security Income Program, which is different than the retirement survivors or disability insurance programs. So RSDI is for retirement survivors or disability insurance benefits. So on the left, we have information about the SSI program, that SSI is funded by general fund taxes, by general revenue. It's strictly a needs-based, means-tested program. And this is different than retirement survivors and disability insurance benefits, where there's no means testing. People who receive these benefits, retirement survivors and disability insurance benefits, for the most part, they don't have to meet any financial eligibility rules, so there are no rules about their income or resources. Instead, the RSDI monthly benefit amount is based on how much an individual earned when he or she was working. And you can see in the column on the right that RSDI benefits are funded through payroll or FICA taxes that individuals have paid into the Social Security trust funds while they're working. And it's an employment-based social insurance program. So their monthly benefit amount is based on a progressive formula that SSA uses to calculate the exact amount that an individual will receive each month. So generally, the retirement survivor or disability insurance benefit amount does not decrease if the beneficiary receives other income. They're guaranteed a particular amount based on how much they earned when working. So there's no resource limit for individuals receiving RSDI benefits either. But on the other hand, since federal SSI benefits amount will decrease if a recipient has other income, and there's a very low resource limit for SSI recipients, which stands at $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for an eligible couple. So just providing this compare and contrast here so that everybody is clear that we are talking about SSI recipients and applicants today. We are not talking about people who receive retirement survivors or disability insurance benefits. These income and resource rules only apply to SSI recipients. And there are a little bit less than 8 million people who receive SSI, and on the order of 65 million people or more who receive retirement survivors or disability insurance benefits. A lot of times people are not sure what kind of benefits they're getting from Social Security Administration. And the easiest way to know for sure is to look at the notices that an individual is getting from SSA to figure out what kind of benefits they are receiving. Is it SSI or is it retirement survivors or disability insurance? You'll be able to tell because right at the top of the notice, it will either say supplemental security income or retirement survivors and disability insurance. So that's how you know, even when the person receiving the benefits isn't clear themselves. And just to make things a little bit more complicated, there are about 2.5 million people who receive both. They receive a small amount of retirement survivors or disability insurance benefits based on their earnings, and they are also eligible for a small amount of SSI as a supplement to those benefits. They still have to follow the same SSI rules, those financial eligibility rules for SSI, in order to continue receiving that SSI as a supplement. So here's the exciting news for today that we're going to focus on is the recent policy guidance from the Social Security Administration. So emergency message, EM stands for emergency message 20014 REV3 is the effect of COVID-19 related financial assistance on SSI income and resources. This was published on July 23rd of 2021, and it's in effect until January 23rd of 2022. This is fairly standard for emergency messages from SSA, is that they are usually in effect for 6 months. And you can tell that this is the fourth version of this emergency message by the REV3. That means revision 3. So it's actually the 4th version of this emergency message that SSA has published. And this revision issued in July of 2021 presents a significant change from the previous versions of this emergency message. It's much more expansive and generous than the guidance that Social Security had issued earlier. And it's important to be familiar what they are currently saying. The main information contained in this emergency message is 2 charts listing all of the different kinds of financial assistance that SSA has identified to date. One chart is pandemic-related assistance that meets the criteria for disaster assistance exclusions for SSI purposes, and then a chart for the assistance that does not meet disaster assistance criteria. So SSA has said that the list in the 2 charts will likely continue to grow and develop over time, and SSA will continue to update this EM with information about additional pandemic-related financial assistance as it develops. So this emergency message may be revised without notice in the future. So even though the version that they published in July is in effect until January 23rd of 2022, we may well see a revision 4 or 5 in the coming months as they add different kinds of new financial assistance, if there is any, passed by Congress in the coming months. And then on the same day, the Social Security Administration published a new emergency message, EM 21050, that's known as Special Processing Instructions for Applying SSI Income and Resource Exclusions to Pandemic-Related Disaster Assistance. Again, published on the same day of July 23rd, 2021, and in effect until January 23rd of 2022, but again, can be revised at any time, and we may well see revisions in the coming months. So that's something to keep in mind and pay attention to. Basically, this emergency message provides instructions to SSA employees working in the local offices, providing them special development and documentation procedures that they need to follow for pandemic-related disaster assistance for SSI applicants and recipients. It's basically divided it into 2 parts. The first part regarding income exclusions, because now many types of assistance received during the pandemic are excluded from income in accordance with existing disaster assistance procedures at SSA. So the first step is to identify whether a particular kind of assistance is actually pandemic-related disaster assistance. Then the employees are instructed to look at the first emergency message that I talked about on the previous slide, EM 20014 revision 3. They're supposed to consult those charts to see if a particular type of disaster assistance is listed there. Or they're supposed to contact the regional office if they come across anything that's not listed in those charts there in that emergency message. And then they're supposed to document the income that they're excluding in the system at SSA. So they're supposed to follow those steps and instructions to document that an SSI recipient or applicant has received a particular type of pandemic-related disaster assistance and it has been received beginning back to March of 2020. So this is a retroactive instruction that people are being given now, that going back to March of 2020 through the end of the pandemic period. And as of today, the disaster declaration from the president remains in effect in all states, 5 territories, and 32 tribal areas. So that means any pandemic assistance received during this period, while the pandemic period is ongoing, is considered pandemic-related disaster assistance. Once that disaster declaration ends, then any assistance received after that end of that period, it's not going to be pandemic-related disaster assistance anymore and would be subject to normal income and resource policies, but that day has not come yet. So we're still in the pandemic period for the purposes of this emergency message. But you know, someday this disaster will end, right? That disaster declaration will be rescinded. And then I anticipate that the Social Security Administration will revise this emergency message to indicate what that date is, that the pandemic period has ended. So an important aspect of this emergency message is the instructions given regarding procedures for documenting unemployment insurance benefits. That previously, the Social Security Administration was uncertain about how they were going to handle unemployment insurance benefits. And so for many people, that decision was put on hold for many months. Or perhaps people had applications denied or their benefits suspended because somebody at SSA went ahead and was counting unemployment insurance benefits as income for SSI purposes. Now, Social Security is saying, no, we're not going to count any type of unemployment insurance benefits while the disaster assistance income exclusion period is in place for a particular state. So there are some states that have ended pandemic unemployment insurance benefits. Some states chose to end them in June, others in July. Many other states continue to pay out pandemic unemployment benefits. So for those states that continue to pay it out, that pandemic period of exclusion for unemployment benefits has not yet ended. But for other states, it has ended. So there is a chart in this emergency message that lays out the dates for when any unemployment benefits would be excluded. And it's not only the pandemic unemployment benefits that are excluded, it's also regular state unemployment benefits that are also excluded under this policy. But the difference from state to state is the period for when those unemployment benefits will be excluded. So you need to check the chart in this emergency message to see what the time period is for the exclusion of unemployment benefits for your state. The second part of this emergency message goes into resource exclusions. And they acknowledge that given the administrative complexities involved in processing pandemic-related resource exclusions at such a large scale, special processing applies to resource determinations involving pandemic-related disaster assistance. Basically meaning that there are just so many different kinds of what they're considering pandemic-related disaster assistance that is not being counted as a resource. It's very difficult for SSA employees to identify whether or not money that an SSI applicant or recipient has in the bank is from an excluded source or not, so that it's going to take a lot of effort by SSA technicians to actually work through all of these issues. It's not going to be an automatic exclusion. So pandemic-related disaster assistance exclusions must be considered during initial claims, redeterminations, and any other post-eligibility event involving resource verifications. So that's a lot of different touch points where this issue can come up. And Social Security has data matching with bank accounts for SSI applicants and recipients called Access to Financial Institutions, or AFI verifications. And generally, they can just see the amount of money in a particular bank account on the first moment of the first day of a month to see whether the individual is over that resource limit or not, but they can't see the source of the money in the bank account. So it's really going to require additional scrutiny in months when excess resources are involved. And it will require manual actions by SSA employees to apply these pandemic-related resource exclusions to say that, okay, this person is not actually over the resource limit, even though their bank account is over $2,000 or $3,000 for a couple, because there's money in there that needs to be excluded and should not be counted. So it's really going to require some initiative on the part of the SSI applicant or recipient, because the SSA employees are only going to do that development and research and exclude that money from being counted as a resource when an individual alleges that the amount they have in their bank account should be excluded. So employees are directed to accept the individual's reasonable allegations regarding how much assistance was retained and how the funds are being held. But, you know, I have concerns about the reasonableness standard there in this emergency message. Some Social Security employees in local offices are more reasonable than others. So this can be a challenge, but there are the instructions there on what needs to be done when an individual does make this allegation that they are not over the resource limit because they are holding money that should be excluded and should not be counted towards the resource limit for them. Okay, so we've gone through what is an overview of what's in these two different emergency messages. Let's take a deeper look at some different types of pandemic-related disaster assistance. Importantly are economic impact payments, stimulus payments. These are definitely pandemic-related disaster assistance excluded from income and resources. And now the big change that has happened in July is that there is no time limit on these economic impact payments being excluded from resources, from being counted as a resource. So previously, the Social Security Administration had said for these economic impact payments would not be counted as income for SSI purposes and would not be counted as a resource for 12 months under the existing rule that does not count tax refunds as a resource for 12 months. But now, since they are considered pandemic-related disaster assistance, there is no longer that 12-month time limit on impact payments being excluded from resources. So you see here, there's an important note in emergency message 21050 saying that because there's this continuing resource exclusion, individuals need to save documentation regarding their economic impact payments, because SSA may request evidence from individuals who continue to hold on to those economic impact payments over the long term. So there may be SSI recipients who did not appeal an overpayment notice or a notice suspending their SSI benefits in the past, since March or April of 2020, thinking that SSA was correct in counting their economic impact payment and not realizing that it should have been excluded from being counted as a resource. They can appeal that overpayment notice or notice of planned action suspending their SSI benefits for being over the resource limit now. They can go ahead and argue they have good cause for late filing, but it's very important to get an SSI recipient's full SSI payment back into pay status, and also get back any money that may have been collected on an erroneous overpayment. We may be talking about a lot of money for some individuals that SSA either suspended their benefits for being over the resource limit because they were counting an economic impact payment as a resource when they should not have, or they may have started collecting on an overpayment, and that's not correct. So people should go ahead and file an appeal, a request for reconsideration now, if they are in the position of having an erroneous overpayment or an erroneous suspension of their benefits. And they should, cite to these emergency messages and say they have good cause for late filing. They want SSA to fix that error now. And there's an interesting example given around economic impact payments in EM 21050. SSI receive economic impact payments, each in a single deposit to their checking account in the given months, and the recipient alleges saving some of the money in their joint checking account in the months after they received the EIPs, but then all the money was spent down within a few months each time. So the important thing to notice here in this example is that the SSI recipient is speaking with a technician during a redetermination, and they are reporting that they received the economic impact payments. So even though these economic impact payments are not counted as income and are excluded from being counted as a resource indefinitely, the SSI recipient should still report about their economic impact payments to the person at SSA they're speaking to. So the SSA technician, once they receive this report at the redetermination, they're going to request an AFI verification, that is information through data matching about the SSI recipient's bank account. And when it comes back, the technician is going to look at the various amounts in the balance of the bank account and see whether that matches up with when the economic impact payments were received and whether the person is over the resource limit in certain months. So this technician is going to get the AFI verification for this SSI recipient and see that they were over the resource limit in the months of June of 2020, February of 2021, May of 2021, and June of 2021. And they're going to notice that this is that this pattern matches up with what the recipient has told about when they received their payments, how much they received, and when they spent down. So then the technician at SSA can note that even though they would otherwise be ineligible for these months because they were over the resource limit, that they shouldn't get an overpayment, or they shouldn't have their SSI suspended because they're not going to count the economic impact payment towards the resource limit. So then the technician has to compare the account balances to the alleged economic impact payments, and then when the fact pattern and the bank balances align with the information they've gotten from the recipient, then they're going to apply the resource exclusions to these months in the systems. The problem is when there is not a matchup, when the fact pattern that the SSI recipient has given to the SSA employee and their bank balances that they get through the AFI verification, they don't align. So then the SSA employee is going to have to contact the person and verify whether the excess resources are attributable to pandemic-related disaster assistance and exclude only those amounts that can be attributed to retained pandemic-related disaster assistance or any other exclusion, right? Whether it's from their SSI benefits being deposited early, or perhaps a federal tax return, or other resources that are excluded from being counted. So then they're going to need to record any discrepancies, update the systems, and develop according to normal policies. And they are instructed in Emergency Message 21050 to use your best judgment when assessing the reasonableness of a person's allegation and only obtain detailed explanations when needed. The example they give here is a couple stating that they received $5,900 for their first economic impact payment in April of 2020, and they've retained that. That would be reasonable if they have 7 dependent children in their household, but it's not going to be reasonable for a single person with no dependents to say that they got $5,900 for their economic impact payment. That's just, they know that that's not the way it worked. So, they're going to be inquiring about how much an individual received in their economic impact payment, when they received it, and how long they've retained it. Another example of pandemic-related disaster assistance that is excluded from income and resources are California, the Golden State stimulus payments and the Golden State grant program payments, again, excluded from income and excluded from being counted as a resource indefinitely with no time limit. There were also stimulus payments in Maryland and tax rebates in in New Mexico that are not counted as income and not counted as a resource. So if there are other state programs that are not listed in the emergency messages, then each is going to be evaluated separately. And the Social Security employees are directed to contact their regional office to see if any other state stimulus programs are considered pandemic-related disaster assistance. But again, these state stimulus programs are not counted as income and not counted as a resource indefinitely. There's no time limit on them being excluded as a resource. And then we'll come back to unemployment benefits, because this is really important to emphasize that all regular and pandemic unemployment benefits paid during the pandemic period are excluded from being counted as an income and resources. The pandemic period is identified as beginning in March of 2020 and being ongoing in many states, although some states ended the pandemic unemployment benefits in June or July of 2021. So the pandemic period for when the unemployment benefits are excluded has ended in those states. And you need to check the date in emergency message 21050 for your state to see whether the pandemic period is ongoing or not. This is a big change because normally unemployment benefits are counted as unearned income, and they reduce SSI benefits dollar for dollar after just the small $20 income disregard each month. So Social Security held many cases involving unemployment benefits and did not take any action on them for many months. And they coded those cases as involving unemployment benefits in their systems. And then beginning in August of 2021, they made automatic changes in their systems to all of those cases that were coded as involving unemployment benefits starting in August. So no manual action was required to be taken by SSA employees to resolve those cases. We should have seen SSA starting to pay full benefits and making automatic deposits of retroactive benefits in those cases starting in this month of September 2021. But this does raise the question about what about cases that were not coded properly or are not in Social Security systems at all. So it's important to be on the lookout for people who have received unemployment benefits since March of 2020 and have had problems with SSI benefits as a result. This might not be the SSI recipient themselves. It might be, for example, a parent, if it's a child receiving SSI, or a spouse. So for these individuals, you may need to help them contact their local SSA office, identify that this is an issue involving unemployment benefits being counted erroneously, and request that they take action to correct the situation. This could potentially mean thousands of dollars are at stake for SSI applicants and recipients, especially those who were told that unemployment benefits for themselves or family members made them ineligible for SSI last year and were discouraged from applying for SSI benefits. They're not going to be in SSA systems at this point for any sort of automatic correction. So the information they received was correct at the time, but now SSI has changed its rules retroactively back to March of 2020, so they can take advantage of this change, and they can cite to a regulation that allows for an earlier filing date for an SSI application in the case of misinformation. And the citation for that regulation is 20 CFR 416.351. So this may be helpful for people who did not go ahead with applying for SSI last year, or who did not appeal the denial of an application or even an overpayment notice at the time last year. And in SSI cases, a decision can be reopened or revised within 12 months for any reason. So for many people, it's not too late for them to go back and appeal a denial of an application or an overpayment notice at this point because of the change regarding how SSA is treating unemployment benefits. So I think those three are the most important pandemic-related disaster assistance that are covered in these emergency messages. But I did want to take a moment here to just list out the others that are contained in the chart of the types of pandemic-related disaster assistance that SSA will not count as income or resources for SSI purposes. So the first is the Paycheck Protection Program, loan forgiveness to employers and self-employed individuals, Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, again, loans or grants to employers and self-employed individuals, Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, direct payments were made to farmers and ranchers, the COVID-19 Veteran Rapid Retraining Assistance Program, COVID-19 Funeral Assistance Funds, the Emergency Rental Assistance Funds, and emergency assistance for rural housing and rural rental assistance. And there's more, right? There's the Homeowner Assistance Fund, Housing Assistance and Supportive Services Programs for Native Americans, tribal payments from the Coronavirus Relief Fund and the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, supporting foster youth and families, higher education emergency relief funds, emergency assistance to children and families through the Pandemic Emergency Assistance Fund, farm loan assistance for socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, and USDA assistance and support for socially disadvantaged farmers, ranchers, forest landowners, and operators and groups. So a lot of different financial assistance approved by Congress since the start of the pandemic in March of 2020, that these funds are, for SSI purposes, are not counted as income and not counted as a resource indefinitely. So next we turn to what is explained in the emergency messages that SSA is not going to consider pandemic-related disaster assistance. So most importantly is the monthly child tax credit that some people are receiving as a monthly advance. This is not considered disaster assistance, but SSA will not consider the child tax credit as income and will not count this money as a resource for the 12 months after it's received for SSI purposes. So this is under an existing rule, and the citations to the POMs, they're at the bottom, they're the Program Operation Manual Systems, or POMs, for how federal tax refunds and advanced tax credits are not counted for SSI purposes as income and are not counted as a resource for 12 months. So receiving the child tax credit should not affect an individual's SSI benefits, even though it's not considered disaster assistance. And there is another emergency message that was published about a week ago, EM 21058, that talks more about the child tax credit and it's how it shouldn't impact an individual's SSI benefits. The next thing to keep in mind about what's not considered pandemic-related disaster assistance are wages. So there have been certain programs authorizing hazard duty pay or premium pay, special bonuses, and also the wage payments made to employees under the Paycheck Protection Program or the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. All of those are treated like regular wages for SSI purposes. And there is instructions in the POMs about how to count wages for income purposes for SSI. So that's the citations to those sections of the POMs about how to calculate wages for the purposes of SSI. And these are going to be counted as regular wages. They're not going to be excluded from being counted as income and not going to be excluded from resources. And then there have been other benefits authorized by Congress, particularly the Low-Income Home Water Assistance Program. It's a new program that was included in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 that was passed in March of this year that functions much like LIHEAP. So these benefits are excluded from being counted as income and resources under existing sections of the POMs. So they have their own rules. They are excluded from being counted as income and resources, but not because they are pandemic-related disaster assistance. So that is how that's different. And then emergency broadband benefit. Again, this is a program to give low-income households access to the internet at a lower payment rate, so that they don't actually receive any income. So it should not be counted as income, in-kind support and maintenance, or a resource. It's just a program that low-income households qualify for. They still have to pay an amount to get internet access, but it's a reduced amount. So that's a benefit for those households, but it's not going to be counted for SSI purposes. So what happens now? If SSA does not need additional information from someone, they're just going to go ahead and restore the individual's SSI payment, issue any underpayment, and mail them a letter explaining what's happened. And it's going to be sent to the most recent address they have on record for that recipient and to any representative or payee that individual may have. So it is in this month of September 21 that individuals are going to start seeing this change, that if SSA is able to take action automatically, if things have gotten coded properly in their systems, then they're just going to go ahead and take action automatically. And so individuals may see these situations being worked out on their own, where they don't have to take any action as SSA works through these cases, where they have flagged them or coded them a certain way in their systems. Some of them are happening automatically now, and others may take a few months to be worked through. So just because an individual hasn't been restored or received an underpayment this month in September doesn't mean they won't see that money in the coming months, but some situations just may be worked out automatically, especially situations involving unemployment benefits for some SSI recipients. SSA made those changes to identify the benefits in the systems and are making the updates automatically, so that doesn't require intervention by an SSA employee. And I think it's important to remind everybody that these underpayments that people are going to be receiving are not counted as income and are not counted as a resource for 9 months. So people have 9 months to spend down any underpayment that they receive after the month they receive it. So this is this 9-month exclusion rule is in the POMS at SI 01130.600. It's called retroactive SSI and RSDI payments. And it has very clearly in there that they are not counted as income and not counted as a resource for 9 months after receipt. In situations where SSA needs additional information from somebody, either to get the information or to take a new SSI application, they're going to send the individual a letter explaining that they need to speak with that individual at a scheduled appointment time by telephone. Again, Social Security local offices are not open to the public. So these appointments, scheduled appointments, are not going to happen in person. They're going to be conducted by telephone. It's especially important for individuals to contact the Social Security Administration if their mailing address has changed, right? They're not going to receive the letter telling them that Social Security needs to schedule an appointment with them to take a new claim or to get information from them if they haven't informed the Social Security Administration about their change in mailing address. And individuals don't need to wait until they get a letter from SSA to reach out if they feel that SSA has made a mistake or hasn't gotten around to contacting them about correcting any problems that they've had since March of 2020, then they can affirmatively reach out to SSA to say, I want to straighten this out. In particular, bank account balances above the resource limit is going to require additional information from the individual and manual actions by an SSA employee to apply the pandemic-related resource exclusions. So individuals may need to gather documents to show that the funds in their bank accounts are from an excluded source, or they may need to make arguments about good cause for filing an appeal late, or they may need to say, to Social Security that they want them to reopen a claim to get an earlier filing date. And again, this can potentially represent thousands of dollars in SSI benefits for individuals. So it's very important to be proactive. It's going to take many months for SSA to work through all of these cases, but I think that individuals should not wait around and can be proactive about reaching out to their local office using SSA's office locator on their website to figure out the phone number that they need to call and try and speak with somebody about what's going on with their situation. And I think this is also a good time to remind folks of the section of the POMS, SI 01130.700, identifying excluded funds that have been commingled with non-excluded funds. And that section of the POMS says, always assume when withdrawals are made from an account with commingled funds in it that non-excluded funds have been withdrawn first, leaving as much of the excluded funds in the account as possible. So that's just a reminder about that section of the POMS that I think is going to be very relevant for people who have their economic impact payments or other excluded resources that they're holding on to in their bank accounts. So just a reminder about the different resources that are available for folks, links to these 2 emergency messages that were published on July 23rd, and also the NCLER practice tip about these changes that we shared last month. And then also we have updated fact sheets on the NCLER website, particularly regarding stimulus payments for nursing home residents, HCBS recipients, and those who have a representative payee. So helpful fact sheets that we've updated regarding the stimulus payments for folks in these situations. So now I think we have a few minutes for questions.
Great, thank you, Kate. And just as a reminder to everyone, the handouts box is where you can find the slides and the practice tips. So if you're looking for those, please check out that handouts box. If for some reason you can't get them there, you will receive them in a post-webinar email. So Kate, we do have a number of questions. First, I'll start with a clarifying question. You had cited the CFR when you were discussing unemployment benefits. Wondering if you mind sharing that citation one more time. We had a few questions about that.
Definitely, I will go back here. Let's see if I can find it in my notes again. I thought people would ask about this. So that citation, okay, here we go. So this allows for an earlier filing date for an SSI application in the case of misinformation, and the citation is 20 CFR 416.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. As Kate shared, you can reach out to us at consultnicler@acl.hhs.gov if you have any questions or could use some more clarification. We also received additional questions today that we did not get to on this webinar. However, we will follow up with you after this webinar, and as we mentioned, you'll receive a post-webinar email with the slides, recording, and handouts. You should receive that within a week. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Kate. Do you have anything left to share before we close this out?
No, I just really appreciate everybody joining us today to get this new information and really hopefully be able to use it to make an impact for SSI recipients and applicants.
Great, thank you. Well, have a nice afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today.